Hello, everyone. In this video, I'm fortunate enough to sit down with one of the greatest producers in Ireland, the co-founder of Big Things Film, the amazing Alan Moloney. Alan is a producer behind films such as Intermission, Breakfast on Pluto, Marlowe, Perrier's Bounty, The Escapist, and small things like these, which you can go watch in cinemas right now. And he's very kindly agreed to take the time to chat with some nobody like me while the film is out in the world, while he's going all around the world promoting it. So, sir, thank you so much for taking the time to come on. How are you doing today?
Yeah, good. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here. Nice to see you.
Thank
And
you so much. And I mean, I'd love to ask you, what's this period like for you now? Because when you're making a film, the last thing you're probably thinking about is going to premieres and red carpets. And, when you're on the eighth day of a 3 week shoot, you're probably not thinking about that. So what's this period like for you, as a producer? Is it unnatural, or what's this current time like?
like we started the process. Um, I'm I think it was probably about September 2022, or was it
Wow.
2021? I'm 21. I can't remember. I get my years confused now. So we bought the rights. When did we shoot the film? We shot the film last year. That was 2023. So there was probably uh yeah, so 2022 we started working on
Wow.
the film. So um no, we shot the film. Yeah, we did. Yeah, so it's a long old period. And so, by the time you get to now, um it's a bit like childbirth. I think it's probably very painful, and you want to get your baby out into the world, and then you let it go, and it kind of goes off on its own, and it has its own adventure, and you lose all control at that point.
Yeah.
But um yeah.
What's it like watching it with an audience? Because I'm sure when you're editing it or when it's in the edit or you're at that stage, you're probably watching it 400 times. So it's probably gotten to the point where you know every beat, you know every scene, you know what's coming next. But what's it like to actually watch it with an audience? Will you put yourself through that? I know some people they'll watch it 400 times in the edit, once at a premiere and never again. Is that the way you like to operate, or how many times would you end up seeing the film?
I mean, about 400 times at the time. I watched it in Berlin, and then I didn't see it again until the other night in Dublin.
Wow.
I didn't watch it in London at the premiere there purposely because I wanted to wait and watch it in Dublin, with an Irish audience.
Yeah.
And so I came to it quite fresh, having not seen it in that length of time. And it was fantastic, actually. I felt really pleased
Wow.
watching the film. Yeah, I felt like we'd done a good job, and I had no misgivings about any of it, because in the making of every film, you make certain decisions in a kind of, I guess, the the period of post-production. You've got deadlines, you've got decisions that you need to make in
Yeah.
certain ways. You test the film, you do this, you do that, and then you make decisions. And sometimes you don't know if they're the right or wrong decisions. You're just kind of going with your gut, or going with whatever the majority feels is right.
Wow.
And so, but I felt watching the film that actually we'd made really good choices. And I was very pleased in that respect.
And is that an instinctual thing, knowing those choices to make, or does that come with experience?
I think it's a combination of things.
Really?
And yeah, I do. I said to somebody the other day, or the other evening, having watched the film,
Yeah.
that I I think it, and I think this is true. I think we couldn't have made this film, or we wouldn't have made the same film 20 years ago as the one that we've made now. And because I'm not sure we would have had the confidence.
Yeah.
Um, I think
Wow.
this film is a very confident film. I think it knows what it is, and it's not afraid of that. Um, and a lot of that, I think, is born out of the experience of I mean, Tim is, such a wonderful director, and so brilliant. And obviously Cillian, goes without saying, but I think, everyone who was involved kind of knew what they were doing, and we were all on the same page. And I think that that's
Yeah.
about experience as much as anything else.
Wow. That's fascinating. That's such a fascinating way to look. And have you felt that with much other projects, that feeling? Or is this kind of something that's kind of original to small
I
things like
think
these?
particularly with this because, and the film is, I think it's quite bold
Yeah.
in the way that it is,
Yeah.
in the way that the story is told and how it unfolds and how it leaves the audience, the way in which it leaves the audience and what it leaves the audience with. And so I think this one, most films, most stories in some shape or form have there's a schematic to it. There's a beginning, middle, and end. There's a first,
Yeah.
second, third act. You could argue there could be four acts. And this, of course, has those, and you could apply that. You could apply a grid to this film, and you could find those points. But it is, I think, somewhat less conventional than
Wow.
others. No, I
Oh, that's
think.
fascinating. And
Mm.
so do you kind of believe in the idea that once a film goes out there, it belongs to the audience and like, you can't really sit next to them and say, oh yeah, the reason that's in there is because of this, it kind of belongs to an audience. It's kind of the idea of the death of the author. And I mean, something like this, which is obviously, I think, culturally resonant with the people of Ireland in a lot of ways. This is something that in a lot of ways, I feel like it's has kind of been a shadow hanging over Ireland in some way that can't even be articulated. So what's it been like? Do you feel like once the film's done, it doesn't even belong to you all anymore, and it's up for people to interpret? And I'm sure people will have visceral reactions. I'm sure people will like it. I'm sure, obviously, some people will have different reactions. Does that worry you, or is that just part of the process to you at this point?
I think as part of the process. I mean, you do lose uh any control over a film once it's released, but the whole point of making it is to release it. So,
Yeah.
you want it to be judged for what it is. You hope that it's judged in a way that you feel is fair. I think this film does resonate in a different way than many others because of, and particularly in Ireland. But actually, I think hopefully internationally as well for different reasons.
Wow.
But I think that it's, it is, I wouldn't say the intention, but it's part of its function is to provoke discussion and debate, and
Yeah.
um, and also allow people talk about a time and a regime and a way of life that society allowed when it shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And it therefore puts the onus on us as citizens to make sure it doesn't happen again. And so, if the film serves to help that discussion, then that's great, you know.
Yeah. And it's funny. It feels like it's sort of it's sort of a big screen thing for, the type of story that doesn't really get shown on the big screen. It's something that puts a spotlight on that. And it's funny, like the type of things that are depicted in that film were probably things that were happening before I was even born or alive. And yet, obviously, I think I've always felt like there's always been, like I said, that shadow hanging over Ireland in a lot of ways, in a lot of different aspects. So because it was such kind of I struggle to find the right word. I suppose intimate, and because it was such an honest, depiction you were trying to go for. Were you worried by that at all at the start? Because you knew obviously this film is going to resonate with people on a different scale than probably some of your other films. So did that worry you at all, or were you, because you're so experienced, you were kind of like, it's just another film?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, the whole reason for doing the film. I mean, there's a few reasons for doing the film, but for me, certainly one of the most significant reasons for doing the film is that it has the power to draw an audience in, show the audience something in a light or from a perspective that they may not have considered it before, and then allow them um, to discuss and I guess even learn from it. I mean,
Yeah.
what Bill Furlong does in the story by challenging the status quo and the abuse of power that was so obviously going on is something that we as citizens, I think we should always be asking ourselves the question, what would Bill Furlong do?
Wow.
And
Yeah.
you know, if you look around the world right now and you look at the um, various injustices and how they're affecting society and different societies in the way that they are. You know, people need to stand up
Yeah.
to abuse of power, and they need the courage to do that. And so, um, that's what this story is about. One man who found the courage to do that. You know.
Amazing. And sure, I'd love to ask you just about producing. You know, I know lots of producers who will kind of come on and they'll even come on in post-production to help with distribution. Some will come on from the very start. Was that the case for this? And is that normally how you work? Will you come on and kind of help develop it from early days? Or is there times you'll jump onto a film one day before shooting? Or when do you kind of come onto a project?
So normally pretty early. Sometimes at the very, very beginning.
Yeah.
With this, it was at the start. It was Cillian who had shared the book with me and said, "I think this might be worth our while thinking about." And that was where the conversation started. There are others where other producers come to me, depending on what it is, and ask me to help with some aspect or other. Or you know, often you know, producers will go to other producers in different parts of the world if the story takes place in a different part of the world. So,
Wow.
you know, people will come to me with stories that take place in Ireland because they know I'm Irish, and or you know, or vice versa. You know, I mean that happens all the time. So producers can get involved for many different reasons. But in an ideal world, you know, I think the ones that probably mean most to me are ones like this, where you're there from the ground up and you get to see it from the very beginning through to the very end, you know.
Wow. And it's so funny. I always ask these questions. I've gotten quite a few different answers. What is it about a certain project that will make you say, "Oh, is it something about the writing? Is it, you know, a singular voice, or what is it that will, is it just even instinctual? Is it something you can't articulate? How will you know if something is worth kind of proceeding with? And will you know straight away? Will you have to take a few days, or can you even get someone and be like, that's not for us, or oh yeah, I'm interested in this? What's that process like of actually getting something and deciding if it's worth pursuing?
Sometimes it can be very immediate. Sometimes it's you know, you read something and it's just, I remember reading Intermission for the first time, and you know,
Wow.
by the end of page 3, I wanted to, you know, I I wanted to, more than anything in life, make that film, produce that film. You know, it does depend. I mean, this film, when I read the book, I was very immediately kind of taken by it, and knew and understood the what the kind of stakes of the story were, and the value of the film, if you like.
Yeah.
But it is, you know, it can be different things at different times. You know, when you've got 2 young children to raise, you can be motivated by commercial reasons. You know, you can, when you get a little older, you can be maybe less driven by those reasons, but you know, those factors. But you know, nonetheless, it I think at the heart of it, it has to be or should always be about good writing, or stories that you feel compelled to tell, or stories that you feel need to be out there in the world.
Wow. And is there anything that you feel makes a good screenplay? Like, will you be able to tell within the first 10 pages, like, oh, this is a good screenplay? And is it something you can even articulate again? Or is it something where it's just like you don't know how to describe it? But can you tell if something's a good screenplay? And is there something that kind of helps identify it, if that makes sense?
I think you can read something that's very well written and recognize it's very well written without necessarily feeling the compulsion to make
Wow.
that film. You can also read something and know that the writing still needs work, and that the story or the screenplay still needs development. It isn't fully cooked. It isn't any of those things, but you can feel that compulsion to make the film. So, you know, again, it does very much depend on it. You know, there is, to a degree, that feeling, that kind of gut feeling. You have to have, I think, that feeling about it.
Wow.
But you know, I want. It's like if it's going to be a year or 2 or 3 of your life, you need to know that it's it's going to be worth it at the end of the day. That you're going to feel that you did
Because
a
it's a
good thing.
commitment, you know, it's a commitment.
It is. It is. I mean, making a film is very um absorbing. I mean, you basically become completely sucked into this world for the period of whatever that time is, um and there's you find there's very little else goes on in your life for that period, and we are all probably OCD and ADHD and all of those things, and so um yeah, so you just need to feel that you really want to do that. And actually, the older I get, the more I need to feel it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's really interesting. But it's so fascinating to hear you talk about how it's instinctual, you know,
Mm,
because you know, even with filmmakers, you read interviews with like Paul Thomas Anderson and M. Night Shyamalan. They talk about when they started off, they were operating purely from instinct because they don't know how a film's made.
mm.
You know, it's their first time making a film, and so they're kind of having all these insecurities, but they're just following their gut. And then you look at their early films, and it's some of their best work they've ended up doing. Is that kind of the same for producing? At the start, were you operating purely off instinct, and then it kind of became more, I know what to do. And now do you feel yourself trying to return to that place of instinct, or has it always just been for you instinct?
So I think that probably at different times in my life, it's probably evolved to a degree. I mean,
Yeah.
when I started working, firstly, I didn't work in drama until I was well into my 20s, well in the second half of my 20s. And so um, I started working when I was about 19, 20, and I got a job in a small little production company, and I would have done anything. I like anything at all, and did in fact do anything at all. I produced corporate videos, I produced travel films. I did anything at all because I just wanted to be doing it.
Wow.
And it was Ireland in 1986, 87, 88, but there wasn't really that much happening. So I just did what I could. Um, so and I think then, I got to do a television drama. I got to do a movie. I probably would have done those whatever they were, to a
Yeah.
degree.
Yeah.
Um, it may have been different for the writers and the directors at that time, but for me, I just wanted to make films.
Exactly.
And
Wow.
so, but then as I got a little bit older and I got a little bit more discerning, maybe I suppose my priorities shifted a little bit, and you just evolve and grow as human beings.
And
And
then once the kids came in, it was more the commercial stuff that's
yeah,
kind of
well,
that.
they didn't come along for quite some time after that. So yeah.
You were looking for any superhero film shooting in Ireland, any of them going up to Wicklow? But that's fascinating. And so I'd love to ask you with Big Things films, you know, I was reading interviews and like it was funny kind of talking about the idea. Is your goal with Big Things films kind of focus on more Irish productions, maybe adapting some Irish novels? Is that, or are you kind of open to branching out and going wherever with, or is it still early days?
I mean, the movie we've just finished, which will be out next year, is an English story, and set actually in Somerset,
Wow.
and we have a film that we're developing that is set in America. And so I think to answer your question, I think we are entirely agnostic about where
Yeah.
the stories take place. That said, I think it is probably very likely that in 5 years' time we will have told more Irish stories than not,
Wow.
because just the nature of we're both Irish. It's just kind of there's inevitability to that. I think in a sense, but the philosophy of the company is to find and develop stories that we feel compelled to tell, and stories that have something to say, and work with writers and filmmakers that we want to kind of support and creatively, and allow them kind of get the most out of whatever it is they're doing.
Yeah, I mean, and it's funny because I mean, you look at the history, I think, of Irish cinema, you know, then it was Jim Sheridan and Neil Jordan for the longest time. And then, like, you know, you had people like Joe Comerford and kind of Bob Quinn, more kind of independently. But I mean, I guess probably the two Oscar babies of Ireland would probably be Neil and Jim. And but now it's evolved to a point where there's like an influx of Irish talent in Ireland. You know, you go to the Galway Film Festival, there's hundreds of Irish filmmakers there with short films and features. And I think, you know, it's funny seeing the progression Ireland has made. What's it been like for you seeing the progression from Intermission, you know, from even back then to now? You know, Intermission, which was before I was born, by the way, just to make you feel a little bit old. But what's it been like to see that just progression, I suppose, of Irish cinema? And how has it changed?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed beyond compare. I mean, when I started out, there was literally, it was unusual if there was one film made in the country
Wow.
in a year. There was probably one film made every 2 or 3 years for, you know, the first kind of 10 years of my career. And sometime in about the two significant things happened. The first was that the Irish Film Board, which had existed and then was then shut down by some political act of madness, they shut it down. That was reopened, and a couple of years later, the government introduced what was then called Section 35, which is now Section 481 of the Finance Act, which effectively created a tax credit for films that are
Wow.
shooting in Ireland. And so what that meant was that with the film board, we could get money to develop scripts, and additionally get production investment. And with the tax credit, we could offset the cost of the film. So if a film cost, whatever, if a film cost 100%, we got 25% of that back, right? So, so that meant that we were going to the marketplace when we firstly we had a script because we'd been able to pay the writer with the money
Yeah.
the film board had given us.
Oh yeah.
And then we were able to go out into the marketplace, and we had, by definition, because we had the tax credit we had and the film board's investment, we might have 35% of the total cost of the film already. So when we engaged with those conversations, when we went to Cannes or we went to Toronto, whatever
You're
it
in a
was,
good place.
yeah. So we're going to the market saying, well, we've got 35%, we're looking for 65%. Costs whatever it costs, 10 million. So we got 3.5 million. We need 6.5. What's the film worth internationally through the international sales process? Can we get to 6.5 million? How do we get to 6.5 million? And then we figure out how we go from there. And so there was a few of us, I think, that came up in that period. I mean, Neil and Jim had, they had their successes end of the sort of 80s, beginning of the 90s was when they kind of had, became household names.
Yeah.
We were kind of waiting in the wings, if you like. And then through the 90s, I think probably cut our teeth and acquired the skills we acquired. So there was myself and Ned Guiney and Andrew Lowe and Rob Walpole and James Flynn, and there's a bunch of us. We were all sort of in our 20s, growing through our 20s in that period. And
Wow.
yeah, and it was quite an exciting time at one level. But it was still very much a cottage industry, no question. And I think, uh, you know, probably took until about maybe I don't know, the early 2000s, mid noughties for the kind of industry to begin to sort of explode, if you like. And so there's been 20 years of sustained growth now.
When I
And
was born, everything changed. I was the messiah of Irish cinema.
that was it. It was you. It
That's
was
what I
all
think.
you, Daniel.
Honestly,
Yeah.
thank you. I'm going to put that up on the channel. Famed producer Alan Moloney says Daniel saved the Irish film industry. Look, your words, not mine.
Yeah,
But I
it
mean,
was. You were the second coming.
I think so. I think so. I'm glad someone notices. I'm glad someone
There.
appreciates it. But it's fascinating. I could literally sit here and listen to just like the history of Irish cinema all day because it's kind of fascinating. And I think film kind of exists here in a way it doesn't in other places. And now it's the opposite of what it was in the 80s. There's an influx. There's probably too much talent. So, when you're working at big things, does it like Are you looking for novels to adapt, or will like directors send you scripts through agents, or like is it just a bit of everything, or do you find yourself now reading novels thinking like, could this be a good film, or what's that process like?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I haven't read a book in a long time for the without thinking, is this going to be a film? Um, but yeah, I mean, the answer to that is all of the above. It's stuff comes into us in various different ways, and or we're out looking for it. So we're talking to agents, talking to publishers, talking to writers, all the time, and engaged in a sort of ongoing process. And so some of the projects are books, and some of them are original stories.
Wow.
Um,
And so do you still have to be, is it like that commitment you need? Because like you said, it could be 3 years, and it probably will be 3 years. Do you still need to have that commitment when you're having these early talks?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you go out with the intention of, I mean, every day you're hoping that something is gonna, you know,
Stick.
trigger, just be that thing. And we talk about things and projects all the time. So, we like, did you read that one? What did you think of that? Did you read this? What about this one? This is an interesting idea I heard. What do you think? And so there's that sort of dialogue going on, all the time. So
Wow.
that's kind of how it works.
Wow. That's
Mm.
fascinating. And so small
Mm.
things like these, people can go watch that in cinemas right now as we speak.
I think probably from about, I don't know, in about an hour. I think it opens today. So yeah, I
So
guess.
it's like first I saved Irish cinema, and now I'm opening small things like these. Now,
There
once we
you
do this, we were waiting until we did this interview before we put it out in the world.
Well,
So
if it has a great opening weekend, it will absolutely be because of this interview.
absolutely. Well, look, I'll take probably 15% of the cash from it, but that's all, I'll let you keep the rest of it because I'm feeling generous. Sir, thank you so much. My last and final question before I let you go. What advice would you have for anyone, I suppose, in Ireland who's looking to break into the film industry now?
Look, I think that people who want to make films, um, will find their way.
Yeah,
It is, it takes a degree of tenacity. It takes an enormous amount of patience and time. But if you have the compulsion and if you have the interest, you'll find your way, So, and whatever your individual this discipline might be, just stick with it, That would be my
absolutely.
advice.
Sure, thank you so much. Before we finish up, is there anything you could promote? Obviously, probably small things like these is probably the big one that people should go check out.
That's it.
Small
Got
things, small things like these, go watch in cinemas. If it's a great first opening weekend, Alan will tell everyone I'm the messiah of Irish cinema. So please make sure to go do that. Get some good luck going for the channel. Sir, thank you so much for taking the time, Chammy. I'll talk to you a little bit off air. Everyone, thank you guys so much for watching. Small things like these available in cinemas right now.